Every Sunday, Samuel Grayson visited his son's grave. It had been 5 years since his son Alex had passed away, but the pain still felt as raw as the day he lost him. The cemetery was a peaceful place, with tall trees and a quiet breeze that seemed to whisper Alex's name. His grave was marked by a simple headstone. Alex Grayson, a light gone too soon. Samuel would bring flowers, always Alex's favorite, sunflowers, and sit by the grave for hours. He would talk to Alex, telling him about his week, his regrets, and the life he wished they could have shared. It was the only way Samuel knew how to keep his son's memory alive. But one Sunday, something unexpected happened. As Samuel approached Alex's grave, he noticed a young boy standing there. The boy couldn't have been more than 12, with messy black hair and a worn-out jacket. He was holding a small toy car, which he placed gently on the grave. Samuel froze, his heart pounding. Who was this boy, and why was he visiting Alex's grave? "Hey," Samuel called out, his voice cracking slightly. "What are you doing here?" The boy turned sharply, his eyes wide with surprise. For a moment they just stared at each other. Then, without a word, the boy bolted, running through the cemetery and disappearing into the trees. Samuel stood there, stunned. His mind raced with questions. Who was that boy? What connection did he have to Alex, and why had he run away? That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. The image of the boy at Alex's grave haunted him. There was something familiar about him, something that tugged at Samuel's heart. He knew he had to find answers. The next morning, Samuel called his private investigator, a man named Victor. "I need your help," Samuel said, his voice firm. "There's a boy, about 12 years old, black hair, wearing a worn-out jacket. He was at my son's grave yesterday. I need to know who he is and why he was there." Victor nodded. "Consider it done." For days, Samuel waited anxiously, his mind consumed by thoughts of the boy. He couldn't shake the feeling that this boy held the key to something important, something that could change his life forever. Victor worked tirelessly, using all his resources to track down the boy. Meanwhile, Samuel found himself unable to focus on anything else. His once routine life as a billionaire, filled with board meetings, charity galas, and business deals, now felt empty and meaningless. All he could think about was the boy at Alex's grave. 5 days later, Victor returned with answers. He handed Samuel a file filled with photos and documents. "His name is Lucas," Victor began. "He's 12 years old and lives with his mother Clara in a small apartment on the other side of town. They've been struggling financially for years. From what I've gathered, Lucas visits the cemetery once or twice a month, always alone." Samuel's hands trembled as he flipped through the file. There were photos of Lucas, his bright eyes, his shy smile, and a few of Clara, a woman in her early 30s with tired but kind eyes. "Why would Lucas be visiting my son's grave?" Samuel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Victor shrugged. "That's what you need to find out. But if you want answers, you should talk to them directly." Samuel nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I will." The next morning, Samuel drove to Clara and Lucas's apartment. It was a modest building in a quiet neighborhood, a far cry from the luxuries Samuel was used to. As he parked his sleek black car outside, a few neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, curious about the wealthy stranger in their midst. Samuel knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. Moments later, Clara opened the door. She looked at him with a mix of surprise and caution. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady but guarded. "I'm Samuel Grayson," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I believe you know something about my son, Alex." Clara's face paled. She stepped aside, allowing Samuel to enter. The apartment was small but cozy, filled with the scent of freshly baked bread and the sound of a child's laughter. Samuel's eyes landed on a photo of Lucas, holding a soccer ball and grinning from ear to ear. "Why was your son visiting my son's grave?" Samuel asked, his voice filled with a mix of desperation and hope. "I need to know." Clara took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she gestured for him to sit. "Please, Mr. Grayson, sit down. There's something I need to tell you." As Samuel sat on the worn-out couch, his mind raced. He had spent years trying to move past the pain of losing Alex, only to find himself here, on the verge of discovering something that could either heal him or break him all over again. Clara looked at him, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place: fear, sorrow, and perhaps a trace of hope. "There's a reason Lucas visits Alex's grave," she began, her voice trembling, "and it's a reason that you deserve to know." Samuel leaned forward, his hands clenched tightly together. "Tell me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, just tell me." Clara took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Lucas is Alex's son," she said softly. Samuel froze, the words echoing in his mind like a thunderclap. Alex's son. It didn't seem possible. His voice trembled as he asked, "What do you mean?" "Alex never told me he had a child." Clara nodded, her eyes filled with sadness. "He didn't know. I didn't find out I was pregnant until after he passed away." Samuel leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. Memories of Alex flooded back, his laughter, his dreams, and the arguments they had before his death. Had he failed as a father so badly that Alex had felt he couldn't share something as monumental as this? Clara continued, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Alex and I were together for a short time. He was kind, loving, and everything I needed at that point in my life. But he was also conflicted. About you, about his place in your world. He always felt like he wasn't enough for you." Samuel's throat tightened. "That's not true," he whispered. "I loved him." "But you never showed it in the way he needed," Clara replied gently. "And when he passed, I was left alone, trying to figure out how to raise Lucas. I didn't want anything from you. I didn't even think you'd believe me if I came forward." Samuel buried his face in his hands. He had spent years building an empire, convincing himself that his wealth and power could fill the void left by Alex's death. But now he realized that all his money, all his success, couldn't buy back the lost moments with his son, or the connection he now had with a grandson he didn't know existed. "Can I meet him?" Samuel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Lucas is at school right now, but he'll be back soon. I'll explain everything to him." As they waited, Samuel felt a mix of emotions: guilt, regret, and a strange sense of hope. He had spent so many years living in the past, but now, for the first time, he felt like he had a chance to build a future. When Lucas returned home, he was surprised to see Samuel sitting in the living room. His dark eyes, so much like Alex's, widened in recognition. "You're the man from the cemetery," Lucas said quietly. Samuel nodded, his voice steady but kind. "And you're the boy who visits my son's grave. Lucas, do you know who I am?" Lucas hesitated, then glanced at his mother. Clara gave him a reassuring nod. "You're my grandpa," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hit Samuel like a punch to the gut. For a moment he couldn't speak, his emotions too overwhelming. Finally he said, "Yes, I am. And I'm sorry it took me so long to find you." Lucas studied him carefully. "Why didn't you ever come to see us before?" Samuel swallowed hard. "I didn't know you existed. If I had, things would have been different." Lucas shrugged, his young face betraying a wisdom beyond his years. "It's okay. I have my mom. She's all I need." Samuel felt a lump in his throat. He had spent so many years chasing success, thinking it would make him happy. But now, sitting in this small apartment with Clara and Lucas, he realized that what he had been searching for was right here in front of him. Over the next few weeks, Samuel began visiting Clara and Lucas regularly. He brought gifts, books, toys, and even a new bicycle for Lucas. But every time he tried to offer money or other forms of financial help, Clara refused. "We don't need your money," she said firmly. "What Lucas needs is a family, not charity." Samuel didn't know how to respond. For the first time in his life, his wealth felt like a burden instead of a blessing. He wanted to help, to make amends for all the years he had missed, but Clara and Lucas seemed determined to live simply without his influence. Still, Samuel wasn't ready to give up. One evening he brought a set of blueprints to their apartment. "This is my mansion," he explained, spreading the papers on the table. "It's far too big for just me. I want you both to come live there with me." Clara shook her head immediately. "Samuel, we're happy where we are. Moving into your world would only complicate things." "But you don't understand," Samuel insisted. "I've been alone for so long. I have everything a person could want except family. Please, let me do this for you." Lucas, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "Grandpa, I don't need a mansion or fancy things. I just want you to visit us and spend time with us. That's all." Samuel's heart ached at the boy's honesty. He realized that his attempts to buy their affection were misguided. What Lucas wanted wasn't wealth, it was connection. And for the first time, Samuel understood what he truly needed to do. Samuel decided to take a different approach. Instead of trying to bring Clara and Lucas into his world, he immersed himself in theirs. He started by helping Clara repair their small apartment, fixing leaky faucets, painting walls, and even assembling a new bookshelf for Lucas's growing collection of books. At first, Lucas was hesitant around Samuel, unsure of how to act around the grandfather he had just met. But as the days passed, the boy began to warm up to him. They spent afternoons working on school projects together, and Samuel even joined Lucas for a game of soccer in the park. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Lucas turned to Samuel and asked, "Grandpa, do you miss my dad?" Samuel nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. "Every day, but being here with you and your mom, it helps. It feels like a piece of him is still with me." Lucas smiled. "Maybe that's why he brought us together." Those words stayed with Samuel long after Lucas had gone to bed. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. He realized that Alex's legacy wasn't just in the memories they shared. It was in the family they were building together. Months passed, and Samuel's bond with Clara and Lucas grew stronger. He began to see them not just as family, but as the center of his world. The mansion, the business empire, the wealth, it all felt meaningless compared to the joy he found in their small apartment. One evening, as they sat together in the backyard, Samuel made an announcement. "I've decided to sell the mansion," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Clara and Lucas looked at him in surprise. "Why?" Lucas asked. "Because I don't need it anymore," Samuel replied. "What I need is here with you. I'm going to donate most of my wealth to charity and focus on what truly matters: family." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Samuel, are you sure about this?" He nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I spent so many years chasing success, thinking it would make me happy. But I was wrong. Family is the only thing that truly matters." Lucas hugged him tightly. "We're glad you found us, Grandpa." Samuel smiled, tears streaming down his face. "So am I." The sale of Samuel's mansion made headlines, but he didn't care about the public's opinion. For the first time in his life, he felt at peace. He moved into a smaller house near Clara and Lucas, close enough to be part of their daily lives but respectful of their independence. Samuel spent his days helping Lucas with schoolwork, teaching him how to ride a bike, and sharing stories about Alex. He and Clara grew closer too, bonding over their shared love for Lucas and their memories of Alex. One Sunday, they visited Alex's grave together. Samuel placed a bouquet of sunflowers on the headstone, while Lucas placed a small toy car, a symbol of the connection they had built. "I think Dad would be happy," Lucas said, looking up at Samuel. Samuel nodded, his heart full. "I think so too." As they stood there, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the cemetery, Samuel realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along: a sense of belonging, a purpose, and a family. For the first time in years, Samuel Grayson felt like he was finally home.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.